today on Memory Palace Design, we're going to discuss visual perception and how it relates to our concepts of permanence and security. And these are important concepts to understand when we're building a memory castle because we have a lot of information that comes into us visually, and we need to be able to understand how we sort it all out. While I was putting this video together, Halloween happened. And while we take a look at the slides and some other things, we'll put this up in the corner and Professor can go through her activities for Halloween. All right, so first I want to show you this screenshot in the wisdom area of our island. We're not going to be talking about the wisdom area. See, it's right here on our little map at the bottom. But I do want to point out two things that are related to what we're talking about today, because these things are all interrelated. And I just want to point out that we will be talking about them from a different aspect of the ideas of permanence and security in the wisdom area. All right, so there are two items. Now, let me go back again. All right, see, the thinker is over here. It's a familiar, it's called the familiar statue because everybody's familiar with it or should be familiar with it. And then there's a balance toy over here. And we're going to be, balance is a very big concept in wisdom. I don't want to get into that right here, but we're going to be talking a little bit about balance today in instruction. All right. So the thinker here is this familiar statue, as I said, and the balance toy is here. It's a furniture piece in Animal Crossing New Horizons. And we're going to just leave them there in the wisdom section, but I want you to think about these as we're going through, and we'll connect them back up later. All right. The next thing I wanted to talk about were, we talked about Walden last time. This time we're going to be talking about E.F. Schumacher in his book, A Guide for the Perplexed. I want to say here that these are really good books at diagnosing some of our culture's ills. Both these men, though, were, that's another way of putting it. I don't want to get into left and right, but these men would be classified on the left today of the political spectrum. But there's an awful lot that you can, I don't want to say but, that's a terrible thing to say. We need both the left and the right, and we're going to talk about why we do. So the thing I want to say here is that when you are reading an older book, I don't think that this is covered very well in schools anymore, that you're going to find things that you don't like about them, and you're going to find things you disagree about. Or you might embrace the whole book. But the idea here is to encounter other people and their ways of thinking so that you can expand how you think about a subject. All right, and I included this in quote by Will Rogers: "Everybody is ignorant only on different subjects." I recall a book, a series of books I was reading a while back, and I loved the entire series. It was written, I think, in the 70s, and at the very end, he was praising this this new trend, and I don't even remember what it was. What was the trend in thinking? And it was just a very, I don't know, it was debunked later on. So the point was, I was kind of surprised to see it there, but then you have to remember when things first appear, you don't always see their flaws until later on. So I don't want to ruin the whole series because I have a problem with something he thought was, the next best thing since sliced bread. And it just wasn't very enlightening, and no one even talks about it today. So, but still, I find those 3 volumes very helpful in understanding how the mind works, and we will be covering those 3 volumes. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that when you read books or when I introduce books, I am introducing things that I find helpful in understanding how to build our memory palace or how we think. All right, so this book is here. It's E.F. Schumacher. You see, it's a very small book. It is well worth your time to read. It's a very small book. It introduces ideas that we don't even think about today, whether you agree with them or not. This was a book that was written after his book called Small is Beautiful. That's really what he's known for, is the Small is Beautiful. I don't know much about that book, but this was A Guide for the Perplexed was kind of a foundation for that book. He wrote it as so that people would understand where he was coming from. This book I find invaluable. Maybe at some point I will go and read His Small is Beautiful. I'm sure I have it somewhere. I have lots of books, so, and I hope I get to all of them. But the things we want to talk about here are his 4 great truths. He's got a lot more in here, but this was one section that we're going to talk about today. Schumacher put forward what he considers to be the 4 great truths of philosophy. The world is a hierarchical structure with at least 4 levels of being. Now, some people will take issue with this, but this is the way that that pre-modern people thought about the world. We don't think so much this way today, but it wouldn't hurt to reconsider the levels of being when we're talking about our life and what is beyond our life. Okay. And what am I going to say about this? Oh, yes, the hierarchical structure. That also, the idea of hierarchy is diminishing in this culture, that there should be no authority. He shows that this is not possible, with that our entire thought patterns are based on hierarchies. And we'll talk about that a little bit today, how we separate levels of thinking and seeing, and just how we divide things up in our brains. And we do it with a structure. And so it's very hard to get rid of that. Not hard to get rid of it. It's impossible to get rid of that. So it will be impossible to get rid of that. All right. We've talked about the principle of adequateness, I don't know, the principle adequatio, okay, which is what this principle's adequateness is. It's about our ability to perceive the world, okay, with enough preparation. We will be talking about that again. We talked about this in the last video. We will be talking about that again. Thirdly, human learning relates to 4 fields of knowledge. We will not be talking about this time. And the art of living requires an understanding of 2 types of problems. Convergent and divergent. Convergent and divergent. All right, let's move on. All right, here's our balance. Okay. Schumacher divides all problems into problems limited to non-living things and problems which involve living things. Problems that are limited to non-living things are like math problems, 1 + 1 = 2, construction problems, physics problems. These in general, have a solution. They often have only one solution. They might have several solutions, but they reduce down to a solution. Divergent problems are problems which involve living things. World hunger, falling in love, raising children, government. These do not have a single solution. There is no one size all. There are not even 2 or 3 solutions. There are many, many, many ways to approach these problems, and they are divergent because they do not converge on a single answer. All right, so, all right, I wrote that down. Do not have, okay, so divergent problems do not have quote unquote solutions. Any decision to address these problems requires a balance of needs, expectations, and compromise. All right, so let's move on. All right, so I'm going to have a quote here. It's a two-part quote on this screen and the next. This is about mental maps. Now, a memory palace, and I know I keep confusing the words castle and palace. Please bear with me with that. I will be doing that. Our mental memory palace, or even as we are laying out a physical memory palace, okay, still has to do with how we perceive the world. We have a lot of information coming in, and we tend to ignore things that we don't think are important. We also tend to not see things that other people do not think are important. So let's read this quote. On a visit to Leningrad some years ago, 1968, I consulted a map to find out where I was, but I could not make it out. From where I stood, I could see several enormous churches, yet there was no trace of them on my map. When finally an interpreter came to help me, he said, we don't show churches on our maps. Contradicting him, I pointed to one that was very clearly marked. That is a museum, he said, not what we call a living church. It is only the living churches we don't show. It then occurred to me that this was not the first time I had been given a map which failed to show many things I could see right in front of my eyes. All through school and university, I had been given maps of life and knowledge on which there was hardly a trace of many of the things that I most cared about and that seemed to me to be of the greatest possible importance to the conduct of my life. I remembered that for many years my perplexity had been complete and no interpreter had come along to help me. It remained complete until I ceased to suspect the sanity of my perceptions and began instead to suspect the soundness of the maps. Okay. All right, one more slide to show today, and this is from a YouTube channel called Linescapes. This video is called Thumbnail Sketching Tutorial. It was a live stream. That's a video now that you can watch. These two young people are from Germany. They do speak English. And they are showing, what they're doing is that instead of going outside, plein air painting is out, basically means outside. You go outside and you sketch things that you see. What's interesting about this is they use Google Maps, and they find, they just go around the world using Google Maps, and they find a place that they feel like they want to sketch. And then she does the paint. She's doing the sketching in this one. And what's good about this, watching these videos, is that, as I said before, we are always bombarded with a lot of visual information, and we focus only on certain things. But when you're trying to paint or to draw, if you're not trained in it, you don't know what's important. You have to learn all over again how to see the important things in an image. If you try and do it yourself, if you've never done this before, you try to do it yourself, it's very hard to figure out what are the main objects, or how do I sort this information out? What do I put in? What do I leave out? And you see here, she's got a painting that looks like of a church and a bridge. And you see that the trees don't exactly line up. The mountain range here is here, but it doesn't really exactly line up here. And yet we can still recognize the drawing is a representation of this photo. This is all a learned thing, and I think we don't teach enough about drawing, as I said before, without being able. It's another way of sorting out information, and it helps us to think clearly. So these things that get dropped from our school curriculum, drawing, writing essays, all these things help us to clarify our thoughts. We think we understand what we have in our heads until we start to put it down on paper or try to explain it to someone. Then we find out it's a concept. It's not really reasoned out. And so learning these skills, especially at a young age, is are very helpful tools in communicating with other people. And this is a deep human desire to communicate what's inside of us. We live in our own little, you know, cocoon like thing, and we desire to reach out to other people and to communicate what we feel and what we think and have true communication with other people. Well, we need tools to do this. And so honing these tools and making them more expansive will help us to do this. So one more thing before we start back into Animal Crossing and some gameplay. We're going to start talking about the difference between an object and an icon. All right, so I have here an actual object, holding it in my hands. It itself represents a palace. It is not a palace itself or a castle. It's a sand castle. So when I'm talking about an actual thing, an actual object, I could be referring to a single thing, a single object, particular object, or a class of sand castles, all right, which still would be, I might be talking about actual sand castles, okay, or representations of sand castles, all right. We have levels of ideas about castles, sand castles, representations of castles. All right. So this is an important part of our language development, how we begin to separate all of these things out and then begin to abstract from them. All right. It seems simple as I'm saying it, but when you start thinking about it, you realize how vastly complicated that it is. And so we're going to start talking about that today. All right. Okay, so here we are at the end of the Halloween festivities. The big prize is this lovely pumpkin carriage, which I love because Cinderella is my favorite fairy tale. All right, moving on. All right, here we are back at our stone garden map, and I'm standing next to the instruction rock but the next thing we're going to talk about is linked to instruction, but it's instruction using experience. This experience, though, is also related to language development. That is why it's going to go over in the experience area rather than just the instruction area. All right, so let's go over to experience. So this is experience all over here. Oh, and we're going to run into the little tulip girl. It's Sunday morning. Yes, I'll buy some turnips. Feel sorry for this little turnip girl. She always has this little snotty nose. And there's no way to take it off of her, so. Yeah. All right, that's out of the way. So I have a stick, a mannequin, and 2 pieces of fencing here. And we're going to use this to illustrate how young children learn to do a task. So we build a fence. All right, there we go. And I have a stick. I'm going to drop that. All right, so in my house that I used to live in, we had a lot of limbs that would fall down every day. And so I would take them and toss them over the fence. You can't actually toss a stick over the fence here, so I have to walk around it. All right. And then I have a very young grandson at the time. Here's a picture of him with his aunt. And you see how little he is. Right here, he's kicking a soccer ball. But he understands kicking the ball, but he doesn't understand at this age in this picture. Kicking the ball is really, he gets it as long as the ball is there and someone is playing with him. But as he got a little bit older, and let me show that's here. Okay, so there he is. All right, so back here you see this fence, and this is what I was talking about. This is a house that was built in the 60s. So this fencing, this metal fence around it, and then you see the more modern privacy fencing that we use now. So it was double fenced on this side. And then closer to the house, the front and the backyard was separated by the same metal fence. So I would be piling up sticks from the backyard to be bundled up and left for recycling. All right, so you see he's very little here. Within the next year, though, he's going to start to understand direction. Within the next year, he's going to start to understand language much better, and not just the naming of things, but in verbs, how to, and tasks, how to do certain things. So this is what we were doing. So this one day, I was picking up the sticks and throwing them over the fence, and he just thought this was the best fun. So he wanted to pick up the sticks too and throw them over the fence. He could barely reach over the fence, but every time he did it, he just thought it was the best thing. And it was the first time that he understood what I was saying to throw the stick over the fence. Now, and so the process goes like this. I pick up an object. This is a stick. He recognizes the object of the stick. He follows me over to the fence. He throws it over the fence with me. So we're doing this parallel action together. I say to him, throw the stick over the fence. He does this. All right, eventually, in a few days, as the days go by, within a few days, he understood the instruction to find a stick and throw it over the fence. This was it seems so trivial to adults, but was a major step forward in his language development. All right, one more thing about this. It's very important when you are working with very young children that you don't sit down when you're trying to teach them something and kind of point and direct them. You have to get up and do it yourself over and over and over again. This is why it takes a special stamina to teach very young children. And I admire preschool and kindergarten teachers immensely for their tremendous patience at this age. It really is a special kind of patience. I want to show you over here that I'm going back over to the instruction area. I haven't decided whether I'm going to put a mannequin over there or not to kind of tie these two things together. I I don't know yet. I'll have to think about that. Is it really necessary for me to say that this is an instructional thing? It's over here mostly because today we're talking about symbols and how we turn objects and symbols with an action into a verb. This is how it develops. That's how our language develops, and you can see this with young children if you work a lot with them. It's an amazing process. I think we forget as we become adults how long it takes. But I'm fortunate enough to be able to watch my grandchildren now, and I have more time, so I really, really see their development more fully. All right. All right, so now we're going to move this whole little display. Okay. But down to the lower end here in experience, you see that. So excuse me, let's say that again. We're going to move it down to the lower end of experience, the lower left-hand side of our experience section. Two fences are going to go there. Mannequins going here. And drop the stick. Hopefully I will leave it there and not pick it up. And there, we're done. Right. I can't think of anything more to say, but there's plenty of room to say something if I need to put something in this spot. All right. Here we are at the culture rock again. And to do this next level of symbolism and action as it relates to culture, we're going to need to watch a movie clip. So let's do that. This movie is called Love and Death. It was written in it was released in the mid-70s. It's a Woody Allen movie. Diane Keaton is in it. A very funny movie. Love and Death has a lot of references to Russian literature, and most of the references I had read, so I enjoyed this a lot when it came out. It is a mockery on war. We have to remember this is in the 70s, so most of our media at that time, still today, comes from the left of the political spectrum. They were opposed to the war, and they thought that human nature could be changed so that we would behave well enough that we wouldn't go to war, or maybe if we could fix our politics, we could stop people from fighting with each other, or if we just abandoned war altogether, that would be enough to bring world peace. These are the kinds of ideas that were being tossed around in the 70s. We had been through two world wars by this time, and this is just after we had left Vietnam. There didn't seem to be any, and we're in the middle of the Cold War and the nuclear threat. So there are reasons why people were desperate for a solution to world peace. But as we talked before, this is not a convergent problem. There is no solution like laying down your arms and just stopping. I know people would disagree with me about that, but that's not part of our nature. We developed our nature over many eons, and you just can't change human nature because you decide to change human nature. It's going to be what it is. The important thing about Love and Death, though, is that it does display the ideas of the left at this time in a humorous form.
And my own father, a handsome and generous man. In addition to our summer and winter estate, he owned a valuable piece of land. True, it was a small piece, but he carried it with him wherever he went.
Dmitri Petrovich, I would like to buy your land. This land is not for sale. Someday I hope to build on it.
He was an idiot, but I loved him.
One of its sub-themes is a mockery of land, our ties to the land. And this is not really an unusual thing. People who live out in the country have very strong ties to the land, the actual land that they walk around on and live on. They own a little piece of property. And people who live in the city don't, they don't usually own a piece of land. They live in an apartment. Now, the odd thing about this is Woody Allen really loves New York City. That is very clear in all of his movies. They are quintessential New York movies. So it's not that he is not tied to the land of New York, but he feels that the idea of nationalism and patriotism were tied from an inordinate love of land. And that's what was causing war. And he's not completely wrong about that. We will talk about that later. I doubt that he would think that someone could walk in and remove everyone from New York City and take it over themselves. All right, that kind of thing. So would he fight for New York City or would he move on? I don't know. This is the kind of thing he's getting across, that somehow we need to negotiate land ownership in such a way that we don't have wars over land. I don't know how that would ever happen. This movie is a product of its age. I don't know if it really holds up well or not. It really does resonate with that period of time, though. Later on in the movie, he meets his father comes to visit him in a prison, and the little piece of land that he has a little house on it, and it's another very funny scene. So it's a bit that he carries on in this movie. And so the reason for me showing these clips is right here. This is the entrance to our island from the airport. And here on a log stool is a little moss ball. And it reminds me of that little piece of land from the Love and Death movie. And so right here, this little moss ball, we are talking about land and our relationship with land. It's in the culture section because our ideas about land are very tightly connected to culture. In fact, culture is pretty much built on our conceptions of land and property. So our next little grouping of icons here, we're going to pick up from in front of the Able sisters. Oh, I didn't mean to pick up the loom. All right, the loom is here because culture is an interweaving of many things. Our ideas about land. All these things have to work together in order to form a cohesive unit, a cohesive society. All right, so we are going to go off. Up here, we have a little room to spread this out. Yep. Right. Gonna need that. All right, here we have a display stand. Phone. Now these. Phone. Okay, there we go. All right, and the reason for this is the phone stands for the emergency number 911, and the display stand here stands for one of the towers, one of the twin towers. So this is this imagery here is makes me think of the 9/11 event in 2001. So we're going to talk about the flag raising that occurred on that day. All right, so alrighty. All right. Now, the reason why I went through this whole thing about land and our ideas on the left and the right about war and land is because for the last 40 years or so, we've also been divided about our flag. The mockery of owning land or being proud of a small piece of land and trying to hold on to it beyond reason extends also to the divide over what the flag represents. Okay, so here's our three icons symbolizing 9/11. And I'm just going to put a picture here of the towers burning on that day. All right, now as we know, they completely collapsed, and it was pretty devastating down in this area of the city. All right. Now, this is an iconic photo from that day. You look behind these three firemen, you'd see all of this, just a pile that was so high of steel and concrete. It was just horrible. And they said themselves that they were feeling completely devastated, and they were looking for a way of something to do that was positive. And so they found this flag and they raised it up, and if you were watching the news that day and you saw that, it completely changed how people felt that day. Or I don't want to say it like that, but it lifted the mood. This was a transformation, and this happens when you understand the actions as they relate to the symbols that you are using. Even in our Battle Hymn of the Republic, our national anthem, the author is talking about when the dawn comes, will the flag still be standing, or will we be completely defeated? Flag symbols and unit symbols go back millennia. These visual symbols were used in battlefields to convey the status of the status of the military and where they were. If their symbols were completely overrun, the enemy had them and destroyed them, then they were defeated. And so these symbols that we use to convey the status of our situation, or this, what's another word? The state of our being as a collective, go back millennia. So if we belong to a particular tribe, a particular country, these symbols mean something more than just a piece of fabric. They mean the actual land that we're living on. So the actual object in this case is the land, not just New York City, but the entire country, because this is a message that's being sent out to the entire country. The symbol or icon here is the flag. It's the next level up from the object in terms of abstraction. So when we so that when we see it, we know that that is what it is referring to. It is a symbol that points back to an object. Okay. Then there's the action of raising the flag. And that results in a message. I'm not going to assert to one individual, like as I was teaching my grandson how to throw sticks over a fence, but this goes out to an entire country of people who understand what these symbols mean and what the raising of the flag means. Even if you can't say it in words, you understand something about it as it's being lifted up. It's not, it's not all verbal. And then this finally leads to a transformation. This is a transformation of living beings who are watching this action. And the message to those who were Americans would be different than those who were cheering on the destruction of the Twin Towers. All right, so it's all very culturally related. It's related to our culture. Culture and land are tightly connected. And it's important for people to be able to distinguish between the political problems of a flag, the political divisions, and the actual land in which we all live on together. What did the transformation mean that day? It meant that we were not defeated, that we were damaged, but we were not going to let this defeat us, and we were going to rise above it. It's a transformation from a feeling of defeat to one of defiance and strength to carry on despite the tragedy of that day. All right, so we're going to bring those symbols back, and we're going to put them again in front of the Able Sisters house, Able Sisters shop, rather. And let's see. I would think that this would be simple. Oh, yeah. So I decided that I had used the flag as a tile, but I decided not to do that because for several reasons. I mean, I could have put the flag as a mannequin too, but in our culture, we don't generally put the flag on the floor, and we don't to step on, and we don't. We're not supposed to be wearing it as clothing, though we always do. But I just decided I just decided that I would just stick to leaving it as a painting. All right, let me see what else is left. All right, so trying to Okay, so I'm just trying moving things around here to make them work. They're not really working very well. I'm trying to get out here. Oh. All right, so I'm not sure where I'm going to put the phone since I'm not going to put it on the flag mat that I had before. So I'm going to try and take out a few items that I could put the phone on. I'm really not sure what I could use. It's a garden table. That might work. These tables are going to be too big. That's really big. All right, so we'll go back and pick a garden table. That's closer to the colors that we have there. Okay, and we'll take a pillow. That might work. It's a mat. And maybe the arcade seat, though I don't really, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, the diner chair. Diner chair, it's very much reminds me of New York. Okay, there's the garden table. That looks a little big. All right, that pillow is there. That might work. I don't like it, though. All right, there's the diner counter chair. Phone on it. I'm going to end up going with that. I like that best. And you can see that the display case that represented the tower is now has the marigolds on top of it and a candle. So it's a memorial. It's one of the seasonal items. It's a memorial to the dead. And okay, so this is kind of working. I can still get to the loom, but this entrance now is kind of blocked off. I don't like it. And what are we gonna do? All right, we're gonna have to get rid of the pumpkin. That's for sure. I have to put it someplace else. I am going to put it someplace else because I'm going to use it somewhere else, but it's too big right there. Okay, and to spare you all my shuffling around, which went on and on and on, trying to make this look right, we will just jump ahead.
2 hours later.
We just jumped ahead here. All right. So that's much better. All right, that looks good. Well, good enough. All right, now we're going to go back to the culture rock. Okay, here we are at the culture rock, because as I was moving things around, I realized that I don't have some of my markers for these different parts of the island in quite the right places. The desk will do better up here where the wagon was. The wagon stands for experience. The writing desk stands for culture, as I explained in one of the previous videos. And there we go. Okay, so we're looking at the map right now. So the wagon was there. The desk was there. All right. right, and now all right, and now we're over in the experience area. And we're going to put the wagon there. Okay, that's much better because this area on this side of the bridge is experience and this is experience. So now the wagon is really in a better spot than it was. All right. Okay, so we look at the map again. And so now I have put the wagon here. That's much better. You see it's really now in the experience area where it had originally been up closer to resident services. And that's definitely not right. All right. So now as we're starting to lay things out on the island, it's becoming clear where these areas are, and there's beginning to fill out a little bit more. Okay, so that's good. All righty. All right, so we're going to wrap this up talking about a guide for the perplexed again. All right, so what did we talk about so far? Okay, first we spent some time talking about convergent and divergent problems. The Woody Allen movie Love and Death shows us why our approaches to war can, certainly a divergent one. We can't really come up with a complete answer to solve the problem of war. Next, we skipped over the number 3, and we did talk about adequatio again. This is the proper training. We talked about how symbols and action lead to understanding of verbs, how to do things, that some words require an action, and that children, it takes a long time to train children in this way, and this is children are a huge time investment. Alrighty, and then we did not really talk about the levels of being, but we did talk about hierarchical structure. And you see that symbols build upon themselves, the object, the symbol, the actions. These are all physical things that build up to ideas and concepts. Right? So there is a structure to the world and to our thinking. And you can't really get rid of that, or else you're not going to be able to think clearly about solutions to the particular problems that you're facing. But we really haven't done what we said we were going to do in the beginning of this video, which was to dive into the castle. But we needed all of this groundwork laid out before we actually did the deep dive. Okay, so that will happen next time. But before we go, I want to recommend a video. This is an interview by Dr. Jordan Peterson of Dr. Ian McGilchrist. Dr. McGilchrist wrote this book called The Master and His Emissary, The Divided Brain and the Making of the Western World. It's a really fascinating book. I have read it. And this video is like supplementary material to that book, but you don't have to read the book to understand what he's talking about here. So in this video, there's more talk about what we covered today in concerns of balance and permanence and how we perceive these things, and also our attention and relationship to objects in the world. And this clip is specifically about that. So let's watch that for now.
The example I usually give, because it just works so nicely for me, is the mountain behind my house, which is a lump of rock, according to most people these days. But its name in Norse, Telesgare, means the sloping rock. And that tells you something. What it means is that for the Norsemen that came there 1,000 years ago, it was a sign of where they were, and it was a sign to avoid danger because the bay where it is very rocky. So that was what that mountain was for them. But the Picts had been there for 1,000 years before that. And for them, they built their houses in the shelter of it. For them, it was their shelter and the home of the gods. And then in the 18th century, people came there with their sketchbooks because there's a beautiful, many-colored, many-textured form to paint. And then in the 19th century, geologists came there because it happens to be a spectacular example of columnar basalt formation. And to a speculator, therefore, it's dollars. And to a physicist, it's 99.99% empty space, and we don't know what the other 0.01% is. I just say that because which of these is the real mountain? Because we're obsessed with what is real. The answer is every single one of those is a real facet of the mountain that is brought out by the kind of attention that's paid to it. So you go to it as a something, you see that something. And so we should all be questioning what we take to be the obvious all the time. And that should be the feature of an education, to teach us to question. Because if not, we don't exercise morality. We reduce things to the simple way that are useful to us. And that is to
narrowly useful.
And that has detrimental effects on the value of what we're looking at and on us, because we become these cynical people who are only capable of seeing use everywhere.
Right.
And my God, how impoverished,
narrow use.
How impoverished the soul of such a person must be.
For those of you who want a deeper discussion of the things we talked about today, this is a good video to watch. We'll be covering some of this again in later videos, as I said, when we reach the outer circle of our island. Okay. So this has been a very long video for today, and if you made it this far, thank you very much. That's all for now. See you next time.